Perfect. I timed that just right because my food is arriving. My coffee is arriving.
How do you know it's arriving? Do you have a camera out?
I have this thing called Postmates, Eric. It's an app on my phone that we have here in Seattle that actually allows me to order food, have it delivered to my home, and I'm going to blow your mind now. You can track it. You can see where it's going.
Okay, fine. Go do your thing, fucker. Okay.
Welcome to the Center Clueless podcast. I am your co-host, Billy Ray Brewton, and with me is my co-host, Erik Surwill. And this is the podcast that takes a day-by-day approach to politics. How's it going, Erik?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Shooting from the hip. Third week in a row. Let's go.
Shoot from the hip. You know, I kind of like shooting from the hip, though. I'm a big fan of Westerns, always have been.
Right. And the other thing is that one of the key changes in my life with this podcast has been, and I think I've discussed this before, I'm not complaining and arguing as much in real life because I save it for here and we move on. That being said, I went out last night to see a friend's band play, and he's a younger gentleman, so maybe I helped raise him as well. And goddamn, am I old, dude? Holy shit, I am old. 53 is old, especially in a room of 20 to 25-year-olds enjoying music, and I realize that I'm old.
I don't go to a lot of concerts anymore these days for kind of that similar reason. Like, for starters, let's be clear. If I'm not seated the whole time, I ain't going. I'm not going to stand and mosh with a bunch of idiots.
No, you said that because I found myself leaning against a wall for a portion of it. I'm just like, dude.
Yeah, like, I can't do that anymore. And then I don't do outdoor music festivals anymore. Not worth it. Not worth it. And then also, like, a lot of the bands that I've seen Bruce Springsteen too many times to count at this point. If I go to a Bruce Springsteen show now, I feel so fucking old because I'm usually the youngest one there.
Right.
And then, but then if I go to like a newer band that I like, I'm the oldest person there.
You feel young you feel young.
I feel young at a Springsteen, but I still feel old.
Oh,
it still makes me feel old.
Because you're still in the slot with all of them. I get what you're saying.
And then if I go see a newer band, I'm the oldest person there, and that feels like crap. So there's like maybe 3 bands I can go see that don't make me feel like garbage.
Right. Honestly, I didn't care when I was going to clubs in my early to mid 40s. I was still okay. I was still okay being the old guy in the club. And there were some other old people in the clubs, like in the house scene in LA. There's still a pretty decent underground, meaning not commercial house scene. And it wasn't bad, but man, somewhere around the time where I got married, it was over and I wasn't going anymore. And then here we are 7 years later. And I'm like, whew, it is gone. It is gone. But that also uncomfortable was, so this is a person that I work with, and someone else from work showed up there, and the music venue was associated with a weed store. So the place was a smoky box. And so there's also that. I was like, Jesus, man, this is one of those things where, everybody in here is catching a contact high. Let's be honest. It was crazy. Like, it was, and not bad crazy. It was good. It was good music. No complaints whatsoever. It just, I haven't felt old until recently, like older, right? And man, holy shit, I am that guy. And then you showed up. So we were a little late to start today. I was wondering, did Billy Ray go out last night?
Did Billy Ray go out last night? No, Billy Ray stayed inside with his dogs, got stoned, and watched movies.
Right.
That's what Billy Ray did.
Right, there he is. There he is. Hooper the man. All right.
But yeah, so we've got a few things to discuss on this week's episode. It seems that nary a week goes by when there isn't some sort of shenanigans to talk about. I figured it would be a great time to start off with our friend Elon Musk.
Okay.
And what I call this week's Twitter tomfuckery.
Oh, you mean yesterday?
Yesterday's. So, Erik, being two IT people here, why don't you kick us off and talk about some of this Elon Musk tomfuckery?
Well, no, I mean, it was funny because the people started experiencing these issues, these errors, where there were people getting messages about rate limit exceeded, and he posts a tweet discussing that there were going to be like a finite amount of posts or views, or there were going to be limits to your access to Twitter based on your subscription status, the age of your account, and other things. And everybody in the anti-Elon space, but after I looked into it, I vetted what they were saying. The reality was, and what's the most likely problem is, Elon's bill with Google came due yesterday, and it's quite big, maybe $1 billion. I don't know how much, but it was a lot, and that that likely had more to do with the issues yesterday and the continuing but lessening issues today. In other words, it sounds like and feels like, so it sounds like Elon needed to get stuff off of Google, and the issues with service were that fact, and the fact that those issues that he's now repainted as, some determined thing he was going to do to reduce bot activity and data scraping activity. Now that it's starting to, I haven't had any rate limits this morning. I haven't really been hammering Twitter, but it didn't take much yesterday. Search is broken for me as well. This morning, search is broken. So what's sad is that tech guys gaslight like government guys when their shit doesn't work, right? And it's kind of weird that, the free speech maven, the anti-government guy acts just like them when his shit don't work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's just anytime. This ship's been going down as far as I'm concerned since he bought the fucking company. So, it's just a matter of when it finally hits bottom and who's going to be left. I'm just sitting back, like a lot of people, waiting on my blue sky invitation.
Yeah, I'm waiting on my blue sky invitation. Can we hurry that up?
The moment I get that, I am off Twitter that. I kid you not.
You'll be on both for a minute. You'll be on both for a minute.
For a brief minute.
And the thing that's interesting is it's turned Mastodon, because I always go back to Mastodon. I'm not a Mastodon daily, but weekly I'm there because there are people that I read that moved there and don't tweet and don't post on Twitter anymore. But it's interesting is it's turned into more of a blogging site. It's pretty much just this huge blogging site. I like the way Twitter moves speed-wise, right?
Yeah.
And Mastodon isn't going to ever get there. Yeah. But Blue Sky could, and it'd be interesting to see what happens if it does. And I just, the other side of it is I still don't think all those people that got fired, at least half of them were worthless. And I don't mean worthless like they didn't provide the value that they were providing. I mean worthless to where they were providing a value I didn't really need out of Twitter. Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? I didn't really need as much. Man, you know what I'm fucked up on this? I just wish Elon had been what he promised he was going to be. But instead, he turned into a clown. He became a clown fully, in my mind, when he put the use cisgender is a slur. And so here's the point. It's funny when people say cis is a slur, here's the point that they're making. So for instance, you're homosexual. So I said, Billy Ray, you're homosexual. You wouldn't be offended by that, right?
No. Now, I might if you said it in the soulless delivery that you just did.
Sorry.
Billy Ray is a homosexual.
But you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
But if I'm trying to flatten it because here's the point. This fucking asshole Tim Pool. You know who Tim Pool is?
I don't know that I do.
Okay, good. Thank God you don't. He was like an alt-right adjacent guy, but however, he was a legit street journalist for years in the late 2010s. He made this point. He's an asshole now. He made a point that I had to take and at least listen to, which was, I might say Billy Ray is a homosexual, and that's not offensive. But if I said Billy Ray is a homo, that might be offensive, right? And so you see, that's that conversation. That's where this idiot's going to say cis is a slur, right?
Yeah.
Like when you say someone homo, it's like the same as saying cis, kind of like that. That being said, it's still not the same.
It's not even close to the same.
So, getting back to, so that's where meaning Elon, if you're going to put yourself up as the free speech maven, the god of free speech, and that's why you took Twitter, and then you're going to say cisgender is a slur. Look, to be fair, I don't like that term either. I think that term's kind of a weird made-up term that hasn't been justified totally to me. I'm not saying it's not appropriate and that there isn't an appropriate Greek or Latin etymology to the whatever.
I
right?
like to put it through what I call the David Attenborough National Geographic test,
Okay.
where if you put in like observe the cisgender in his natural habitat, well, that sounds just fine as opposed to observe the faggot in his natural habitat.
No.
Like,
Okay,
like,
how about
like,
observe the homo? No, do it with observe the homo. Let's go.
observe
Observe
the
the homo.
observe the homo in his natural. It doesn't work. It
No.
doesn't work. It
Yeah, but
doesn't
hold
work.
on. How about this? Observe the cis guy. That doesn't work either.
Well,
Here's
it's
my
got to be
point, right?
cisgender. It's got to be
Okay,
cisgender.
right. But so the term cis is a slur is the point. Homosexual wasn't a slur. Cisgender isn't a slur, but a homo is a slur. That cis is. I don't buy that. By the way,
Yeah.
I disagree with that.
Yeah.
But why am I saying all this? The fact that Elon got sucked into that, and that's where he got it from, is it just puts him out there as this. He's a crazy person.
Wait,
And
you mean this person who might be fighting Mark Zuckerberg is crazy?
He's not. It's over. It's off. It's off. They canceled that. Sadly.
Damn. Who do you think would have won?
I think. I don't know.
I actually think Zuckerberg might have taken it.
Right. Well, here's the thing. At least Zuckerberg seems to train more, but I could be pulling that entirely out of my ass. And Zuckerberg also, what's funny is all those guys, they sure got a lot of time to
They sure do.
to exercise. But
Without his shirt on, Elon Musk looks like a half melted crayon.
he looks better now. I've been tracking his shirtless pics closely, and
He looks like he's melting.
I know. What's funny is I'd say that, but that's not fair. Who's the guy? See, here I am doing this. So last week I couldn't remember people's names, and here I am again. So the show was Entourage.
Okay, there's Jeremy Piven. There's Adrian Grenier.
The Jeremy Piven character is made after Rahm Emanuel's brother. Is it Rahm Emanuel's brother? What's his name?
Well, I know the character is Ari Gold on
It's
Entourage.
So Rahm Emanuel's brother is the.
You mean Jimmy Emanuel?
Oh no, that's his other Ari Emanuel's brother. It's the other brother.
Oh,
and he's the guy that runs. For instance, his company owns the UFC. Is it Ari? Is it Ari Emanuel? I think, or is it what's his name? Rahm Emanuel brother. Hold on. And I'm bringing this up for a reason. I'm bringing this up for a reason because I just disparaged the rich people, those rich guys that are doing a lot of working out, and Rahm Emanuel's brother. Yeah, it is. It's Ari Emanuel. Okay, so I'm not an idiot. Ari Emanuel described his day where he starts working out at 5 a.m. He wakes up, he works out, and I think that a lot of these guys, a lot of these rich billionaires that are still active in their companies, I think they do similar things. They're actually very busy people. That being said, you know what I'm saying? How ridiculous is it? Meanwhile, by the way, Dana White says that fight would make billions.
I think it would do. Yeah, I think it would do insanely well. I think that shot would do insanely well.
So I would have to state that. I think Zuck wins that fight then. But again, getting all the way back to what you started with, this Twitter blow up was ridiculous and just more mismanagement. I actually don't think Twitter is going to go down. I think that what's going to happen is Twitter will ultimately become less effective once Blue Sky is fully rolled out. The fact that you and I'd have been waiting months for a Blue Sky account. I believe you've been waiting a while too. Once that's up and running and people are able to moderate, because there is a lot of crazy shit that goes on Twitter now. And I don't think that any of the racist shit is appropriate. I believe in free speech. However, I believe in some moderated speech. I'm tired of seeing monkey comments about blacks or it's fucking ridiculous. And I think the thing that's crazy is, and this will tie into a discussion, part of our some of our discussions later, the fact that you can't have a discussion in the middle or in the center that's nuanced, because people will show up and they'll mix the crazy shit in from the ends. So in this case, if you want to talk about the achievement gap with Black Americans versus others in the United States, always some asshole comes in and starts muddying it up with racist shit. And by racist shit, I mean stuff that talks about, I don't know. Let's move on. Let's move on.
I mean, this is actually a good segue into what we like to call cancel corner.
Right.
That's
Oh, yeah,
right,
that's
everybody. It's now cancel corner time, the time when me and Eric discuss the latest cancelings in the world of news and politics. And funnily enough, this edition's topic is actually one of our pictured people. We have
That's
Kevin Spacey, Chick-fil-A, and the person that we're going to be discussing,
Roseanne Barr.
Roseanne. Roseanne got into a 5-minute bout of hot water this week,
One day. Yeah.
which I'll be clear, I fell into for a brief period of time myself. Because so basically what happened, she went on, Theo Vaughn's show.
That's right.
Theo Vaughn is a really popular comedian.
Right.
She went on his show, and this clip suddenly surfaced, which seemed to show Roseanne saying the Holocaust never existed, that millions of Jews should die, that's because they control the world.
Yeah.
And of course, left-wing Twitter basically jacked off for as long as they could off of this beautiful gift that seemingly Roseanne had delivered to them. I felt
like how would she ever say? And by the way, I almost retreated an attack on Barr, and then I pulled back because I was like, I got to hear, because I saw the reason why. Honestly, it's just so funny. I saw the clip, and the fact that Theo Vaughn was agreeing with her, I was like, hold on a second. Theo Vaughn is an edgy comic, by any definition of the word. That being said, he absolutely doesn't even get near the edges of that generally.
No.
And so I was like, and then I saw Theo Vaughn's response, which gave the additional context. She was essentially talking about, by the way, her analogies were still terrible. Her delivery, her communication is poor.
Oh, so, yeah, she's not anything close to what she used to be in terms of like comic delivery. It's very downhill.
Yeah. She's there's some cognitive decline there, maybe, or at least she just doesn't give a fuck. I don't know. But what's messed up is that podcast got taken down by YouTube. Theo Vaughn's podcast got taken down. He went and hosted on Rumble. So while the big cancel died, Theo Vaughn's podcast still got canceled, I believe, off YouTube. And man, that means that there's still some power to that. And the concept that there's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no ability to let them. You're not going to force if you put it into context, it's not context. It's totally appropriate, but because it had been taken out of context so much, it got taken down, and it's kind of like okay, that's part of the digital medium. It's on the listener to reserve judgment until they see the full context, because this isn't even the use of AI or other technology to make it look worse.
It's just an edited clip.
Edited clip.
Yeah.
And edited clips should always be taken with a grain of salt. Always, always, always. Because of this.
I think mine came from like literally 2 nights before I had seen Roseanne on an interview where she said that in the next week she was going to be saying some really divisive things. And so I went into that video with that in my head. And so as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh shit, Roseanne has gone off the deep end. Like,
I thought of you too.
This is like
the second it happened. I was like,
this is what she meant. This is it. And so I immediately just jumped to, which I try not to do normally, but I just like, okay, well, Roseanne's done. But then luckily you came along and was like, oh no, here's the full clip. And then I watched it and it was like, well, of course this makes more sense that a full-blown Jewish person wouldn't be saying the Holocaust didn't exist.
Right. And what's funny is, what's weird is it's not just the context before, but immediately after, she makes the joke like, what did she say? She's like, if there were no Jews in Hollywood.
You better be glad there are.
You better be glad there are Jews in Hollywood, because every show would be a hunting show or a fishing show. And it's like, dude, right? That's a funny joke. And it doesn't criticize Jews to say that they're the creative energy of Hollywood. And I kind of think, and also, again, and I think we've talked about this, part of the reason why there's such a large Jewish representation in Hollywood is in the early 1900s, and that was one of the only things where Jewish businessmen could enter unfettered. There weren't industry or norms or standards in place to hold them back or to say that they couldn't participate. And it's just kind of, it's ridiculous.
But it goes back to also, like, I mean, I certainly wasn't defending Roseanne when she said what she did about Valerie Abbott, but at the same time, I was like, the left seems to really want me to believe that this groundbreaking comedian, this woman who basically changed the game for female comics everywhere, who was one of the most progressive and one of the most edgy voices on television for almost 10 years, like tackled race, tackled queerness, tackled domestic abuse, tackled everything, like all of these hot button issues they tackled on the progressive side for the most part.
Right.
And,
she also, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
and has been a champion for people for most of her career. The left trying to make me believe that she is secretly some virulent racist was never going to fly for me.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
like, if she says that she was fucked up on medication and made a bad tweet, I tend to give her the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying she shouldn't have apologized, which frankly she did.
Yeah.
I'm saying that not everything someone does makes them a fucking violent racist or virulent racist. It just doesn't. Sometimes people just say bad things or do dumb shit. There are a lot of good people out there. I'll use the word good people lightly because I don't know the inner workings of their brain. But I'm sure there are a lot of good people out there who have fucked up and said things that they could wish they could take back.
Right.
And this was just one of those instances. And she got her entire career ripped away from her because of that. And now she's bitter as fuck about it. Yeah. And she's bitter and pissed off. And, and I think her mental health has gotten worse because of it. Because, like, everything she worked her whole life for was essentially just stripped away from her because of one bad tweet. Yeah, I think that's a little ridiculous.
Yeah. The other thing is people. So I'm going to talk about something. It's funny because one of the things I realized that's changed since I was a child, and she came up when I was younger.
Yeah.
And people don't remember this because they weren't there, and older people just let it go. And that is when she gained fame, there was a significant level of achievement there that had to do with the fact that she wasn't within the beauty standards or social standing standards that were allowable at that time. Meaning the unwritten rules. It's funny. The unwritten rules that we talk about when it comes to bias, man, it was actually, look, I grew up as a fat kid, and let me tell you something. That shit wasn't easy, okay? Yeah. Like, I was considered lower class. I was considered a lower social class because I was a fat kid, and she shows up not only somewhat overweight, but frumpy. Yeah. She was coming from the lower
with that voice, with that voice.
Yeah, it was everything that American culture looked down on at that time, and she rolled in and had success anyways.
Yeah,
and I that itself changed how society allowed people to be in public. I want to assert as an example, no Jack Black without Roseanne First. Yeah. As an example, there's no way he would have been the star he was, who he was, without Roseanne breaking that mold. Yeah. The mold of, I want to call it the ugly mold, right? She's not an ugly person, right? But you get my point, right? Not at all. She was not the standard of beauty at the time, which man, in America in the 70s and 80s, that was a thing. And so, anyways,
let's be clear, when Roseanne broke through, it was Vanna White. Right. Vanna White was the standard of beauty. Like, that's what you expected to see on television. Right. It was Dynasty. It was like, that was all of, and like, she completely changed it. And like, look, I'm not saying that people's hearts can't change over the years, that they can't become certain things, but like, do I really think that Roseanne became a racist? No, I don't. I absolutely don't. I'm like, that's ridiculous to me. And, but she had her whole career ripped away. And that's what, that was one of the very first, like, big cancellations, like one of the big, like, oh, we got her. Yeah. And it was like, it's just such a shame. It's such a shame because I do think it has really affected her for the negative ever since.
It changed who she was.
It changed
and now it's the lens through which she performs, which is why she was even having the discussion she was having in the way that she was having it on. So really, the cancel space has created the Roseanne Barr that we know today, right?
Yeah. It absolutely has. This is entirely created by cancel culture. And and again, we talk about all these things. We talk about all of this grace we give people for mental health issues, right? Like, if you are poor, if you are a houseless person, if you are a lower economic class and you have a mental health issue, we will go out of our way to make sure that you can have everything you need. We will be so forgiving. You will get the benefit of the doubt. If you're rich or you're a celebrity, you get none of that.
Right.
You
Right.
make one fuck up, doesn't matter if it's mental health issue, you're out.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess I could see an argument for, but at the same time, I'm like, come on. And I'm not, look, I don't know. I don't know if it was mental health related or not. I have no idea. All I'm saying is like to just jump to she's a racist with all of the background we have seems foolish.
Right.
Seems like a foolish thing to do. But that's the only thing we're talking on cancel culture today because there really wasn't much canceling going on this week, thankfully. I think people were so
well, you know, the right was stuck on the Hunter Biden, Joe Biden bullshit. That's why I mean, I made the joke to you like maybe Hunter was recanceled, but not really, right? Like this is just the banging on the drum of the supposed. Well, I mean that the chat, right?
yeah.
To Zhao, that the Chinese still he got $5 million for that, and so that's going to be in Joe Biden's. That's going to be stuck in Joe Biden's ass for the rest of his.
No, that's not going anywhere. It certainly hasn't helped Joe Biden at all. I mean, all of the we could do a whole episode on the Hunter Biden thing, and maybe we'll someday.
We will.
Maybe we will.
Let's get the info down because I want to see what happens with that before we really go deep. Because I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Joe Biden's actions now. So I'm going to just quickly assert that Joe Biden should basically denounce the behavior of his brother and his son in the terms of selling access to him when they're not, right? Because Joe Biden isn't going to meetings and talking about the things that they want him to talk about, but they're selling it as if they can have an effect on him.
Yeah.
And that's gross. And Joe Biden has to. The game he's playing right now is.
I don't know that he's going to, though. I don't think he's going to, man. I think he is so loyal and won't say anything remotely negative about his family to his own detriment. I don't think he'll do it. And in one way, I respect that about him. I do respect that. Like, I get it. You're loyal. You're a family guy. I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, like, this was wrong.
Yeah.
You know it's wrong. And by not saying it's wrong, it sounds like you're excusing it to some degree.
He doesn't have to say it's wrong. You know what he could do? He could say, so the only thing I want to say about this situation is I don't give anybody any extra weight for giving my son or my brother money. Thanks very much. Just like that. Yeah. And he'd be done. He wouldn't have to address anything. He could just let the future possible suckers, because that's whoever's given money to either of those assholes has been a sucker. Yeah. I assert. Yeah. Others in the conservative side, and this is what they were talking about all last week, instead of some cancellation, was to assert that Joe Biden knows about this and allows it. And he does know about it and he does allow it, but profits off of it. And I don't think
I think that's the difference, right? I mean, and I know people are trying to do the whole comparisons to like Trump and like what Trump did with his kids, but it's like it's a very different thing. Like, and I'm not going to beleaguer this point, but like, Trump put his kids in positions of power with security clearances and like really gave them jobs and like knew that they were profiting off of him, probably helped them profit off of him. Yeah, there's a very big difference.
Jared Kushner's, what is it, $1 or $2 billion Saudi deal absolutely had everything to do with Kush being in office, working for Trump while he was in office. And man, I don't like any of it. By the way, another thing that's aligned with this is the concept of marquee names on boards of companies.
Right.
It's part of the same mess, right? I got the president's brother on the board. Okay. This is part of that same mess. It's influence peddling and it's gross. And every time someone in America wants to go after China for patronage, right? Because patronage is a way for people to sponsor politicians in China. There's a Singaporean political philosopher, Yuan Ong, who says it's the same thing its Chinese patronage is the same as influence peddling in the United States, and it is. It's just different laws. What's the difference? It's the laws. It's still gross. It's taking money, giving it to a politician so they'll pay attention to your cause. It's all gross.
It's interesting, and this is actually a good segue top conversation into our next discussion, but it kind of all goes back to what I talked about and what we talked about on the very first episode of this podcast, which is like the erosion of ethics and civics from politics, which to me starts in the classroom. The fact that classrooms don't teach civics, they don't teach ethics anymore. What are all these things that we're talking about with Hunter Biden and the Trump family and Clarence Thomas and these folks on the Supreme Court? It's ethics. It's ethics. And it is what is the proper way to comport yourself when you are in a position of power. Right. And they either never learned it, but a lot of these folks are old enough where I know that they did, or they just don't care. And it's like, if we don't at least have that foundation of, we may hate each other, we may disagree on everything. I mean, if we don't at least have the foundation of, but we're not going to cheat.
Right. Hey, wait, I got to ask you a question about this. This is totally direct, right to what you're talking about.
Sure.
As a director of a very important, company up there, the film festival that you're part of. How many people have tried to influence you in your position?
None. I mean, I don't get that kind of push. Like, we're still a reasonably, I mean, we're a big organization, but we're a reasonably small nonprofit.
Right.
And so I don't have to worry about it. I mean, little stuff, right?
Right.
Like maybe someone's trying to suck up for a pass to the festival, or they're sucking up to like, but it's nothing like, I don't have to deal with stuff.
No, it's funny because for me, I've had vendors show up and try to, offer me a little something, right?
Yeah.
And the couple of times it was just blatant. Hey, you got me this. What can I do for you? A couple grand. Like, I had someone say that to me.
Yeah.
And I looked him straight in the face. I said, look, this is what I want. I want your shit to fucking work.
Yeah.
So if you really want to know what I want, I use my word to promise you would do your job. Don't make me into a fucking liar.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And the look on their face when they realize, because what they thought is there might be this transaction right here. I've now assigned them maybe well more than $2,000 in labor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make your shit work. And so by doing so over the years, the truth is I honestly still get something out of their request. I just give it right to the agency. Make sure your shit fucking works. And to be fair, generally that helps. And honestly now I find my way through being an IT director easier because I don't do those things. But man, the amount of money I could have made in the last 10 years, not a lot, 5 G's, easy. Yeah. I probably could have squeezed cash. I could have squeezed trips. You name it. It's gross. And the thing is I would assert that if it wasn't so acceptable in society, it wouldn't be so acceptable in politics. As the body politic goes, so will the politicians running that. And it's so if anybody's concerned about corruption in politics, it all starts right here at home. That's really the truth.
No, absolutely it does. And we've allowed it for a very long time. Since the beginning of this fucking democracy, there's been corruption every step of the way in every level of political machinery. Like, I mean, it's just always been there. And I guess it's just to the point where people just accept it. But like, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be trying to do better.
Right.
Just
it's
because
never going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that you can't have continuous improvement.
Exactly. Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and dive into a whole lot of Supreme Court goodness. So if you've been waiting for our hot takes on the Supreme Court this week, and I know both of you have, thank you so much. And we'll be back to comment on that in just a moment after these brief words from our sponsors. We are back, and it's time to talk about what has become our favorite discussion point on this podcast, it seems, which is the United States Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And boy, did they make a lot of decisions in their last weekend session. I figured I would start up with
let's do the good ones, right?
well,
Air quotes good ones, or no?
yeah, well, I think there's only one quote unquote good one, and that is the most recent decision, which essentially they cleared the way for someone who suffers from gender dysphoria. So they had basically sued this Virginia men's prison for violating the ADA.
Right.
And they ruled in favor of the transgender person who has gender dysphoria, and yeah, and that's kind of the win of the week.
Right. So in other words, transgender, just the dysphoria experienced being a transgender individual is part of the you gain protections under the ADA, which is totally and absolutely correct in my opinion.
I agree. I wonder how the trans community feels about how being trans being labeled as a disability.
No, right. And so to be fair, there's the backhandedness of it. But guess what? I'm going to tell you that where I may be different from you is I do see dysphoria. And by dysphoria, I'm going to define that as not feeling that you are the biological sex that you are, right? Someone wants to say assigned at birth. Look, if you got the dogs and the balls and the dick, they're going to tell you that you're a biological man, and if you have fallopian tubes and a vagina, they're going to tell you that you're biologically a woman.
It's Sex Talk with Erik Surwill right here on the Center Clueless podcast.
If your innate gender expression is opposite that, you're going to have a dysphoric reaction, and that is disabling, and that's why you gain treatment for it, which you then can have covered by your medical care.
Well,
and by that. I mean, that's the game.
I think the discussion though is I think the argument would be then, do all trans people have gender dysphoria?
No, right?
That's no. Right? Right. Like it's a no, because I know a lot of trans people who have, who certainly don't feel like being trans is a disability.
Right.
Who certainly don't feel like being trans is like a medical condition or a mental health issue. Like it's just who they are. And so while I see this as a win, I think we have to be careful about separating like gender dysphoria from like the rest of the trans community, because I will say, like, I don't know. I certainly don't think that every trans person has gender dysphoria. I think gender dysphoria is a real condition, and I don't think that necessarily makes someone trans or not trans. Well, it's just a condition.
It's part of the mess. It's part of the mess of this conversation is that there are people whose sole desire is to get gender affirming surgery, pass as much as they can, if not 100%, and then they never want to talk about it again.
Yes,
they're just going to be a woman or a man opposite what their biological markers are. And so there are others, though, that celebrate the distinct difference between their biologic and their biological reality and their gender expression. There are people that absolutely celebrate that, which is really, in some ways, the opposite of what that former described person is. And so I think that part of the mess that I was discussing is this is the mess, meaning not even a mess, it's a mess to me. Complex. The conversation around transgendered expression, I think it's also very new because there is space to allow it now. Yeah, at least in society. Look, I don't always agree with a lot of the gender assertions being made.
Neither do I.
But you know, if you want to express yourself, express yourself. Okay.
Well, that's the thing is, I don't agree with a lot of it, but do I think that every human being who lives in the United States is entitled to the same set of rights as every other one? Absolutely. I don't care how you identify. It doesn't matter to me.
Or how you express.
Yeah, express however you want to express, identify however you want to identify, do whatever you want to do. Like, I want you to be treated the same way as anybody else, as long as you're not dictating how I have to live my life.
Hold on. And let's get off of this because I don't want to do this for an hour because we could. I also don't think necessarily that you can mandate an affirming response.
No, absolutely not.
Because there are just people that have religious or personal belief systems that don't allow for space for this.
Yeah.
Tolerance. That's such an old and terrible word now in some people's game, but you have to tolerate other people's decisions. You don't have to like it.
Yep.
But you absolutely have to tolerate it, and you absolutely can't be hateful in your conduct towards them. Although I don't mandate speech requirements to force that tolerance, right? I don't know, whatever. It's crazy, but go ahead. So that was the good one. That was the good one.
That was the good one. Yeah, that was the good one for the week. And but then we go into we'll go into another section of the LGBTQIA plus community, because what also was decided, and this was a 6-3 decision. They ruled in favor of a Christian web designer in Colorado who refused to create websites to celebrate same-sex marriages. Now, this is, we've seen cases like this before on the Supreme Court with like people trying to challenge like what are religious protections versus blah, blah, blah. And they ruled in favor. And I think a lot of people were surprised because so far, Neil Gorsuch, who is a conservative justice, has been ruling with the queer community more often than not since he's been on this court. And so people were kind of surprised that he did not go in favor of them on this one. But again, I've just got to say, like, and I don't know how to say this without people just thinking, I really don't know how to say this. We're not going to get what we want all the fucking time.
Billy Ray is a Republican.
Well, no, I don't know how to say this, but it's like, anytime, like this is a good example. Like as soon as this got announced about queer, the only thing I saw people doing, we need more justices on the court. We need to do this. We need to do this. I'm like, no, we don't. This is the way the court is supposed to work. Sometimes it's going to favor one side. Sometimes it's going to favor the other. Like that's what I want in a Supreme Court. I don't want a Supreme Court that's just totally one-sided. That defeats the whole purpose of having a Supreme Court. And so yes, they're gonna vote with us sometimes, and we're all gonna be super happy. Sometimes they're gonna make decisions that we don't like, and we're gonna be very, very pissed off. It doesn't mean that we have to completely restructure the court because we disagree with them. That's the way the court works. And there is at least half the population out there who, in a lot of these instances, agree with them.
Right.
And so, like that other half is just totally wrong. Like are
we going? So.
Oh, it's frustrating. Frustrating.
You know what's funny is this is what I'm going to admit that I avoid ever thinking about this. The conversation about refusing the gay couple because you don't want to make a cake for them. Refusing the gay couple because you don't want to make
the big case years ago was the cake baker. Yeah.
You know what I always think when that happens? Every time. I'll do that shit. I'll take that money. I mean, okay, if you want to go ahead and refuse that business, okay, as a guy that's sort of a capitalist, and also as a guy that I honestly don't care about gay couples, and I don't mean don't care like...
Oh, I know what you mean.
I mean, it doesn't, like, who cares? If gay people want to be with each other, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. You know what I mean? And then you can't heap... Like the current heap on top of that is groomers, right? Well, they're going to groom your children into greater acceptance of this deviant behavior.
Yeah.
I got to let you know, man, I've had multiple conversations with my daughter about this. My daughter will see same-sex couples. And it's one of the earliest interesting conversations that I had with my daughter. And it started around late 5, early 6. Daddy, are boys allowed to marry other boys? And I said, yeah. What about girls allowed to marry girls? I said, yeah, of course they are. They're allowed to marry each other. I said, you're often going to see them even holding hands or kissing each other. It's totally normal. And then I asked her the first time, I go, where did you hear about this? And then she said, no, we were walking through the mall because I wanted to make sure, honestly, that she wasn't getting the early, I got it at school shit, right? But we saw it out in reality, out in the, and I just talked with her about it. And honestly, that's my true feeling about it. Like when it comes down to how I'm going to train my daughter to be, that's the way they are. And the interesting thing is, when it comes to gender expression, my daughter clearly chooses the sort of the cisgendered space, and okay too, right? Some people would say, thank God, but I'm not religious. Some people, what I've had more progressive friends from go, what are you going to do, Erik, if your daughter's gay? I said, love her, move on. What are you going to do if she's transgendered? I think we'd already be seeing stuff if she truly was.
Yeah.
I don't really believe in late onset gender.
It's really not something that just snaps. Oh, I'm 22. Time to become another. Like, that's not really the way that works.
No. And you see, what I assert I would see with her now is probably a early dysphoric reaction, right?
Yeah.
A tendency probably to avoid gendered expressions that matched her biological space.
Yeah.
But to be clear, and just to say, I loved when I was a child, I had a doll. Yeah. My mom went, I was 5 years old. My mom went to, she's going on a long trip. It's the first time she's going to leave me alone for a week. And she said, I want to bring you back a gift. What do you want? And I said, I want you to bring me back a dolly. And I played with that doll until my friends made fun of me and I threw it away.
Yeah.
Now, some might call that latter part sad. What's important here is just because you express other gendered items doesn't mean. So I'm saying all that because even if she was resistant to gendered clothing, I still would just raise my child because she's not expressing herself sexually yet. So I don't have to think about or worry about this. I just have to answer her questions when she brings them up. In other words, feed her where she's eating. You know what I mean? Feed her mind where her mind is going. And that's what I've done. How did I get into all this? I think that the desire to suppress gay expression is dead. That shit died in the United States, at least in the 80s. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Yeah.
Gay marriage is allowed. Gay relationships are normal, and you can kiss my ass.
Well, I think what bugs me about this more than anything is, well, no, it certainly doesn't bug me about it more than anything. What bugs me about it more than anything is that there are still people out there who would refuse to serve gay people. But what I'm also like, we're constantly trying to change people's hearts. And that's a very difficult, almost impossible thing to do. Yet we just have it ingrained in our minds that we can do it. Because, I mean, like, so I'm a gay person, right? And this is a stereotype, but like a lot of gay people are affluent. They have more money. They typically are high earners. So, like, I'm an affluent gay person. And I want to get married. And I want to marry my partner. And we want to do all the things that married people do. And so we go to a website designer. And they're like, well, you know, I'm a Christian. I can't serve you because you're gay. Like, my response would be, okay. And then I'd go find a web designer who is gay and supports my thing. So I'm like, I would rather put my money towards a business that supports gay people than spending my money on legal fees and other shit to try to sue somebody to force them into accepting me, which, let's say that I force them into a position where they have to perform this service for me. I'm going to know the entire time that deep in their hearts, they are mortified and they hate and they don't support me. And why would I want them? Why would I want somebody who doesn't to actually do something for me? It makes no sense. Find somebody who does. Let them be bigots all they want. Like, let them do that and let them live and let them have their life. I don't give a shit. Everybody in this world does not have to support me for me to feel validated and feel like I belong in this country. I don't need every other American citizen to support me and validate me.
Right. Like, so just to be clear then, you're not bothered by this decision.
I'm not bothered by this. I'm bothered from the extent that there are still assholes out there who would be so adamant about not serving gay people that they would take it all the way to the fucking Supreme Court. Like, I think that is disturbing.
This was one of those cases. What do they call the case where they it was a test case, right? Like this is a test case because they weren't even. This person wasn't even actually asked to create a website for a gay couple.
Oh no, it was a total. Yeah. It was a total test case. Absolutely.
And so I just Here's my point. Okay, you go ahead and do your thing. I don't like the fact that that gay people in the country are going to have to feel less included because of it, but it's how people feel.
Well, and here's the thing too. Like, I feel like, I mean, look, it's capitalism, right? This is capitalism.
Right.
This is gonna rear its head in time, right? Because what's going to happen? It's going to be a state issue. States are going to decide what is acceptable and what is not. And you know what? If states are going to be so fucking backwards that they want to allow people to discriminate against gay people, guess what? Gay people are just going to leave, and they're not going to move there, and they're going to take their money, and they're going to take their creativity, and they're going to take everything that queer people bring to an economy, and they're going to move it out of that state. And if you don't think that's going to be financially damaging to that state,
right,
that's just what's going to happen. And you're going to see, they're going to go to like California and Washington and New York and all of these places that celebrate queer people. They're not going to go to Missouri. They're not going to go to West Virginia. They're not going to go to these places. And in a few years, we're going to see exactly how damaging something like this is to these economies.
Well, here's the truth. It's never going to damage the economies. What's funny is this is just fodder.
I actually think it will. I actually think it will damage to some degree.
I'm going to tell you why I'm saying that. I think that this case is fodder for the culture wars.
Absolutely.
And what ultimately is going to happen, and it's already happening, is acceptance of gay marriage will continue. Look, it's going to plateau for a bit because we got the whole mess that's going on now. But acceptance for gay lifestyles, gay marriages, gay parentage was steadily on the rise since. Well, it's been steadily on the rise, and since gay marriage was legalized, there's not a single real conservative, someone who believes in less government, that gives a fuck about this. That even cares. They're like, okay, get me. And what's the conservative joke? I can't believe you want to get married. It's terrible. Like that. Joke, right? Yeah. And so the fact is that's how I feel. You don't want to get married. If you want to get married, get married. Yeah. It's funny because I had the same experience with transgendered men, meaning women who have. It's so funny because generally I try not to judge whether or not someone's actually they wants a woman, but what I absolutely do is I just let them. To be fair, and I admit this, I treat men differently than women. I just do. I treat men differently than women. I'm a little bit rougher. I'm a little bit more perverse in my conversation. And is that old school? Is that an old man thing? Fine. I'll take, you know what? I'm good that that's an old man thing. It's still who I am, and it's how I act. What's funny is to get into those conversations. And I find it, what's messed up? Many of the transgendered men that I know or have worked with in the past are often shocked when I first talk to them like that.
Yeah.
Like when I said, like I said something to someone a few months ago, I said, if we do this, we're going to end up with a hot fucking poker up our ass. I said it like that in not a business meeting, but we were discussing.
Yeah.
And they literally recoiled. And I'm like, oh shit, that's right. They're not used to me talking to them or other men talking to them like men. Yeah. And why do I bring this up? I bring it up because the only way that people are going to feel and the only way that this is going to end up working is over time. No one's going to care about this. Act the way you're going to act. I'll act the way I'm going to act, and we'll let it work itself out.
I do think that's where it is headed at some point. I will say this. The good thing about this is when it's becoming a state issue, what we're going to see, though, is sort of like what we saw with Kansas and the whole abortion thing. Like everybody just knew that Kansas was going to vote down abortion. They didn't. Because why? Because the people voted. And I think when this gets to a point where you start seeing this on ballots and you start seeing the actual voting public having to vote on this, you're going to see an overwhelming response in terms of, we don't give a shit. Let people live their lives. We don't care.
Right.
And so,
as a corollary into the affirmative action one, which we're coming up to, do you think that the affirmative action decision, much like the abortion decision, much like Trump's existence in reality, is bad for Republicans?
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I do. And this is a good enough time to segue anyway into that discussion, because it's all tying into the Supreme Court. We can go back and forth if we need to. Because, You've done a lot more research on this particular issue than me, Erik. So why don't you talk to us a little bit about this affirmative action ruling that is really what has been the biggest sort of explosion of the past week. This is what set really everybody off. This is also one of the cases that was on the docket that everybody knew was going to possibly be explosive. Like the abortion ruling, we knew that if we were going to have a mostly conservative court, there was a good chance that affirmative action was going to be up on the axing block. And so you just talked to us a little bit about what happened.
Well, I mean, so what was there was a case that was brought against Harvard, and was it UNC? Was it the other one?
I think so. Yeah. I'm looking. I'm pulling up my notes right now.
I believe it's you. And what's crazy is it was UNC, University of North Carolina. It basically they've disallowed the consideration of race, or at least they've struck down the right for organizations, in this case Harvard and other universities, to consider race in choosing who can come to the school. And depending on who you've talked to, right, this is either the end of the world or this is really important for the Asian community. As an example of one of the, look, if you look at test scores over the last 25, 30 years, most racial categories, whites, Hispanics, blacks, have gone down. In that same time, Asians have gone up. Yeah. It's crazy. If you look at the graph, it's like more Asians are testing at better rates in all of the academic testing. It's not just some, it's all. Yeah. Than every other racial cultural category in the United States. It's I'm just going to talk about the United States. It's similar elsewhere, right? But let's just talk about the United States. And there are considerations in the Harvard situation, especially, where part of the problem for Harvard in this decision is it's now highlighted their legacy admissions program, their children of current professors program, all of that. And what you end up having now is the Asian American communities that were as part of this lawsuit, in fact, are very happy about this. And to pretend that Asians had as hard of a time of it as blacks is ridiculous in the United States. However, they still had a hard time of it.
But let's be clear. I agree with what you just said, but I will say I was seeing people posting on Twitter. They were talking about this very thing, and it was like, how have Asians ever suffered in this country? And I was like, hello, have you heard about something called internment camps?
Have you heard about something about the railroad?
Yeah,
building,
I'm like,
railroad building.
No one is saying that there's parity between the two, but to say that Asians haven't suffered in America is a ridiculous comment to make in the year 2023.
Right, and let's be clear: it's never been as dirty a word to use a racial slur for an Asian as it has been to use a racial slur for a black person.
Absolutely,
people would just roll Asian slurs off of their tongue when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Way more than black. Because it was kind of like when I was a child, 70s and 80s, they were still making Asian jokes on TV.
Sometimes they still were 5 years ago, Erik.
Right. Yeah, it was like they're like everybody's heard something Wong. Okay, everybody's heard these bullshit things, right? And it's kind of like what Asians suffer from is a continued acceptance of generally racist attitudes towards them, likely because of their performance in academia and business. That's the reason why.
Well,
right?
I'll tell you an interesting little story here. I don't want to, and I'm not going to name names. So I have a really good friend who lives in Birmingham who I used to work with, and at the time of this, he would have been probably in his early 70s. Just an amazing guy from New York, that kind of New York attitude, but like an incredibly gifted actor. And we were going to have lunch at this Chinese restaurant outside of Birmingham, a place called Trustful.
Right.
Like I said, old New York guy, very old school guy. And so we go and we sit down, and we're sitting down. Our waitress comes over to take our order, and he's getting ready to go to the restroom. And he was like, I'll order before I go. And he looks right in her eyes, and he was like, I will have the number 4. Me wanty the number 4. You get me number.
Shut
Like,
up. You did not
I'm
say
not
me
kidding.
wanting.
I'm not
You
kidding.
did
I'm
not
not
say
kidding.
me wanting.
Oh yes, I'm not joking. He's
Oh.
literally saying this, and she's like, she's smiling, she's nodding, and she's like, she's like feeding into it. Where she was like, okay, she's doing the whole like polite, humble Chinese servant thing, and then the minute he walks away, she looks dead at me. She goes, "You have no idea how many times that happens to me every day," with as clear an English accent as I have.
Right. And so she saw the look of horror.
She could tell how horrified I was, and she looked at me. She was like, "You have no idea how many times that happens to me every day." And I was like, I had so much respect for her in that moment on a multitude of levels because, like, she was like, I know these people are awful. I'm going to play into that and use that to my benefit, and I'm gonna like. It was just like I was like, and that's the thing is like this guy who did this, like one of the nicest human beings you would ever meet. Like he would give you the shirt off his back, heart of gold. But he came up in this time when like making fun of like Asian people was just part of it. It's what you did. And he hasn't been able to let go of that. And I had a conversation with him a few years later about it. I was like, "Do you remember this time?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I told him what he did. He was like, "Did I really do that?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, it's so much part of how he's grown up. He doesn't even realize that he's doing
it. Yeah.
And he seemed mortified when I told him.
That's a perfect example, right? It's a perfect example. And so someone I work with now, Bin Lee, she's Chinese. And
I know Ben.
Yeah, you have her. And she has a very thick Chinese accent.
Yeah.
I don't have as much difficulty with it as other people do. And what's interesting is watching the frustration within which people express to her when they can't understand her. And then I'm sitting there, and then I've had people go, "You understand her?" I go, "Well, I've worked with her for a long time. I also have I've had in my life a lot of Chinese nationals, first generation Chinese nationals who I've had to talk to. So I kind of get where they're coming from when they're talking to me. I've gotten used to hearing that." I said, that being said, man, she actually knows what you're talking about. I want to let you know that, in fact, not only does she understand what you're talking about, you may be setting yourself up. I've watched her, right? Yeah. I've watched her do exactly what you said, play that up with auditors, and then the auditors say something stupid to her, right? And then she just boop, 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 just watching her hammer these fucking auditors into despair, really.
Yeah.
Like to watch her demoralize auditors has been one of the great benefits of
Why would you not use someone else's ignorance against them if you can? Like use it as a weapon if you have to. Like if someone's going to just throw that shit at you, take it, use it, own it, and then you take away all their fucking power.
So I find the disrespect from a lot of quarters towards Asians' difficulties in American culture specifically to be weird. Yeah. You're like, what do you guys look? You know what it is? So I think that this is part of the mess. Here we go. The unstated mess here is there's an achievement gap between blacks and whites, and between Hispanics and whites, and between whites and Asians. And no one wants to really get into what that achievement gap consists of, really.
Yeah.
I don't personally believe, although there are guys like Charles Murray, who's people hate him. He's the guy that wrote The Bell Curve, so people hate him for being a racist. But to be fair, his stuff is legit on a research level, but he doesn't get into the cultural stuff that may be part of the achievement gap. That being said, I'm just going to say, just because Asians don't have the achievement gap issues that blacks and Hispanics do, doesn't mean that they aren't subject to same or, in fact, more levels of racism. Well, I would assert Asians get way more hate than Hispanics in this country, as an example. And sure, and absolutely, blacks suffered far greater than Asians on the who got shit fucked with, while they were coming up in America. But it's I think still on a day-to-day basis, Asians receive more heat and hate than any other category in the country. They get it not only from whites, but from blacks and Hispanics as well. Sure, blacks and Hispanics give it to each other. There's this mess. But the real concern, and it also goes to the whole conversation about affirmative action. The concern is we're trying to move the achievement gap. We're trying to move numbers there, and nothing's done it. Nothing's done it. Affirmative action hasn't changed the achievement gaps in any way significant. And worse, Asians seem to be accelerating the gap between themselves and every other category, including whites. Most interesting is most white people don't care. That's what's even funnier about this.
Yeah.
Like I've had people come to me, well, do you want all your bosses to be Asian? I'm like, well, most of my bosses for a long time at this agency, for instance, where I wasn't talking to somebody at the agency I'm in, were women, and I don't worry about that. So why would I worry if they were Asian either?
Well, let's look at some numbers really quick, because this will kind of keep this conversation going, which is, so ABC Ipsos did a poll that covered a lot of different areas of this discussion. And what the poll said is that 52% of Americans approve of the Supreme Court affirmative action decision. Right. 32% disapprove, 16% say that they don't know. Now, breaking that down even more, 75% of Republicans, 58% of independents, and 26% of Democrats approve of the decision. Now, going even more, 60% of white people, 58% of Asian people approve of the decision, while only 25% of blacks approve the decision, and Hispanics are split with 40% approving and 40% disapproving.
Right.
So what that tells me is that overall, Americans are in favor of this decision.
Right.
And overall, they're in favor of this decision. And look, I'm not saying that I don't think that I think necessarily affirmative action was a bad thing in certain areas. I think there was a way to implement it that maybe just didn't properly get implemented in a way. But like, no one is denying that. I'm certainly not denying that, there is a racial disparity between whites and blacks. There obviously is. Anybody with eyeballs and ears knows that there is. I don't know that affirmative action is the way to fix that.
Right.
And so when I say that I am in favor of this decision, it's honestly not that I think that there's not a problem that needs to be solved, but I think we're ignoring the actual root of the problem. Like we're not actually addressing the issues. We're skirting around the actual issues, which is actually just like a socioeconomic issue more than it is anything else.
Well, I mean, it's funny because when you look into what the achievement gap is, right? Achievement gap, there's socioeconomic factors, there's educational inequalities, there are cultural and linguistic factors. Mm-hmm. There's the specific cultural factor of, do we accept and how do we react to high stakes testing, right? In the Asian community, it's high stakes testing is the way to go. And maybe in the black community, it's not. So as an example, high stakes testing is painful for people who are culturally black because generally they have socioeconomic factors that don't support learning in the home. They're poorer. Poor people don't have as many resources as rich people do. As an example, my wife and I, we're certainly not rich, but we're certainly spending quite a bit of money on our daughter's education that other families who weren't as privileged in the space of money and finances could support. It's just the truth. Test preparation and resources don't generally skew towards the African American community. There's other things that are more, I don't know, that are more more. Not, they're more. They're left. They're farther left. Conversations about the cultural norms and expectations that we have for blacks is unfair. But a lot of that stuff to me just sounds crazy. Look, if I want to move the achievement gap, what I need to do is make sure that black children are are educated in the same or better ways than white children or other racial those racial characteristics that are being tracked: Hispanic, Black, white, Asian. And to be fair, there's a conversation though that I've come to realize, because I got deep into this. I wanted to understand what the resistance would be in the Black community, and the resistance is there's some element of kind of like the white man's burden. You know what that means, right? The white man's burden, which is really this racist assumption that European culture, American culture, has to help bring Blacks out of the dark ages or something, and that sort of almost systemic racial bias towards Blacks, but causes part of this problem. But the other side of it is there are positive correlates with test and school and academic performance to success in the real world. And it's unfair to not put together something that's going to allow Blacks in an American, a European American society to perform. And I think that there's a lot of times where you have, mostly white, by the way, professors and philosophers and sociologists who, instead of finding ways to improve that achievement gap through classic, well-tested ways of doing that, better education, they're going to go ahead and accept a lower rate of performance from these end users to get into college. That's what this was, okay?
Yeah.
That the standard test scores for Blacks differs radically from Asians at Harvard. And there are professors who have been derided for what I'm about to talk about. They've said, look, we have Blacks that come into our classes and they always perform less well than other racially tracked groups: whites, Asians, Hispanics. In fact, it's, of course, because this is what you're seeing with testing, Asians, whites, Hispanics, Blacks. That stepped performance expectation may even be causing problems for Blacks in these schools, but I don't know anymore that affirmative action is the right move. Why aren't we addressing the educational inequalities from age zero?
Yeah. Affirmative action is a Band-Aid on like an open, gaping wound.
Right.
Like it's, and so I'll give another example here. So I was in the running for a job at a very large queer film festival. And it's a small world. Like the film festival programming world is a very small world. Like we all know each other, right?
Sure.
And I knew a couple of people who were applying for that job. And I knew it was down to like 3 people. And I was one of the people. So it was me, who is a cis white gay dude. Yeah. It was a trans friend of mine. Yeah. And then it was a Black lesbian woman who I also know. And so we knew we were all in the running. There's obviously a rivalry, but you're also still kind of rooting for each other to some degree.
Sure.
But we know each other, right? So I knew going into this, I have way more experience than either of these 2 people. Like way more experience at that point. I have more experience. I've done these roles that I'm applying for. Like on paper, there's no reason in the world that I should not get this job.
Yeah.
But I also knew going in, I'm the cis white guy. I'm probably not going to get this job. I knew that going in, but I'm not someone who's bitter about something like that. I go into those situations and I'm like, okay, you know what? I get it. If that's my price to pay for like hundreds of years of my ancestors being awful, I'll take that as a penance. Okay. I'm just saying, I get where you're. I know, but I'm like, it's fine. And so I ended up not getting the job. They hired my friend who was a Black woman to do the job, who really had no experience in that kind of high level part of a film festival.
Yeah.
And she was fired within 6 months.
Right.
She was let go within 6 months. And after she was let go, I received an email from the same person that I was hired by asking if I would be willing to come back in and discuss taking over the position. And it was such a hard, immediate no. But it was no for one big reason, which is like, I understand, like, you don't want to hire a cis white guy. You're going to hire. That's fine. You do that. But then you have to be willing to set them up for success.
Okay, so I was. You know, what's funny is I'm glad you're saying this.
Yeah,
Keep going. Sorry.
you have to be willing to set them up for success. You can't. It's not enough to just let them in or offer them a job. They have to have the tools in order to do the job. And if they don't have it, you need to be willing to invest in them to make sure they do. They did not do that. And so 6 months later, it was like, oh, this person doesn't have the experience we need. We're not going to invest in them to give them those tools. So let's just get rid of them. And it's like,
what was
that's not the way to do it.
That's what the position was?
It was a head of programming position.
So it was head of program. Okay, so it wasn't like running the organization.
No, right? It was running the programming, which is the big deal, right? So
I'm not trying to belittle it, but what I'm trying to say is that there was a person at the organization she was in that was higher than her.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
And then that person, if they're making the choice to hire an inexperienced black lesbian,
yes,
they should then take on the responsibility for training that inexperienced black lesbian.
Exactly.
Saying, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Like if
I would agree with you on that. And the reason why I bring it up is, but here's the other side of it, right?
But that's what bothered me is the fact that it wasn't that I hired her, even though I was more experienced. I was okay with that because I know this person's an awesome person and they have the capacity to do amazing things. But it was like, don't do it and then just toss them out without like giving them any kind of support. Like that's such a token thing to do.
Right, true. But how much responsibility should organizations have to take to train up?
100% if you know their experience level when you hire them.
So yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. If you're going to put someone in that's inexperienced, you take responsibility for their errors until they're trained up. I get
exactly.
that. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I've heard more than once on the way out, motherfuckers saying to me, not me personally, but me, you didn't set me up for success in this position. You're like, hold on, motherfucker. Hold on, motherfucker. I hired you for a position. You asserted you could do the position when I hired you for the position. Now, to be clear, as a director now, I know that motherfuckers will come in and they'll say shit to me. And I know they don't know what they're talking about. In fact, the hiring process has been one of the most terrible parts of this process of being a boss in the IT realm. But if you're going to come say to me, I can do X job. Yeah. And so to be fair, I agree with you. I, as a director now, will take responsibility for hiring someone. Like, as an example, if I was to lose one of my employees now, I would take responsibility for the fact that we're going to hire the very basic inbound person, and I'm going to have to train him up into the job the way I want him to do it. And that's an assumption I make. So I agree with you. Whoever hired her didn't take that assumption in and didn't get. And by the way, the right move would have been to hire you to coach them for 6 months.
Well, let's winnow it down for a little bit because the exact reasons why this person got let go is because they were brought in, they were head of programming. So they really ran the programming. And the higher ups had an issue with just how diverse the program was. So basically what that means is like, this person was not catering to their donor base, which for a lot of queer film festivals is a gay, white audience. She was not catering to them. Shocker. She's a progressive, radical black lesbian. She's not programming films for fucking cis white dudes. I don't want her programming films for cis white dudes. Like, that's why if you're going to hire somebody like that, hire them for what they bring to the party. The fact that they bring in like this incredible wealth of knowledge about international and diverse cinema and like champion that. Don't bring them in with that being their whole selling point and then being like, this isn't really what we want.
Is there a market for what she programs?
Absolutely. All over the place.
Is there maybe your festival, is there a film festival that caters to that space?
Most queer film festivals do to some degree, but I think the problem there was that she was wanting it to be much more than the norm, right? Like we have here in Seattle, like we do the Seattle Queer Film Festival. It's one of the largest queer film festivals in the country. Right. I would say that our program is as diverse as any program in this country.
Right.
In terms of intersections, in terms of race, we cover. If you're a member of the queer community, we've got you covered somewhere.
Right. Okay, got it. Right.
Yeah. And so, and we make a concerted effort to make sure that our program is diverse. We don't want it to be too white, but we also want to respect that our donor base is still predominantly gay white men or gay lesbian or, or white lesbians. Like that is over 50% of our support.
Right.
And so you're wanting to cater to that group, but also not ignore all of these amazing other communities and intersections that are created. Because I'll be clear, like as a gay man, I'm tired of seeing films about people coming out of the closet and young boys falling in love and AIDS documentaries. Like I've seen these till I'm blue in the face. Like I don't care about those stories anymore. I want to see these stories that are not my periphery, that are like out there. Or
Wait,
like,
so, by the way, are there any gay films about two older gay men and their adopted child?
Plenty.
Yeah, really? I don't. Like,
Oh, plenty.
I don't.
Oh, absolutely. But like, that's the thing, though. Like, I would rather see personally a story about an intersex person or a trans person or a pansexual person because I'm not as familiar with those stories. They haven't been beaten into my head, and but yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you've got to be willing to put in the effort. I'll give you another final example on this topic. Without naming names, I had an employee once who was terminated. I was their employer. I had to terminate them. They were the only person of color in the organization, which makes that a difficult decision. Whether it just does.
Yeah.
And it was easy on one hand because this person was abjectly failing in their job, not meeting any of their metrics. And in fairness, I should have terminated them a year earlier, but I didn't. And when I did finally, let this person go, I was presented that, well, you didn't really set me up for success. And it was like, well, we set metrics together. You and I got together. We set what our metrics were. I offered you support everywhere that I could without training you how to do your job that you were hired to do. And you failed every metric we set. So
Would you train her? She asked for additional training.
If I could have, but it's not, that's the thing though, is like, I could have, but like, this person was in a development job.
Yeah.
Like this is person who's responsible essentially for the financial stability of the organization.
Right.
Like that is a specialized job. Like I can't do your job for you. You're supposed to be the bearer of knowledge in that position. I can support you, but I can't train you how to do something that I've never really been trained to do myself. So it's like, and so that was really the issue, which it was you didn't set me up for success. And it was like, I supported you where you needed it. Like I trusted you to do the job that you were hired to do, that you professed that you were able to do.
Yeah. And
you failed every metric. I can't just have you fail every metric perpetually. Like that's not the way that works. You're getting paid.
It's like I don't disagree with you. I guess here's my thing. I guess right. I kind of in the space of this decision, right? In the space of the affirmative action decision.
Yeah.
I think that there's so much that could be done to support Black Americans.
Yes.
That's outside of this mess. I think that affirmative action, as it instantiated itself through the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, was entirely necessary.
Yeah.
But we're getting to a point now where, I mean, I don't know if you do any significant reading on some of the fucking horrible things said by Harvard administrators about Asians in this whole process, it's turning into a prejudicial attitude towards Asians at some organizations. In this case, I'm talking about Harvard. And it's like, get out of here with that. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. It's not okay at all in any direction. If you're going to preach, and I agree with this preaching, by the way, that people should be treated equally, that people should be given consideration for past damages to their specific community, I'm down. If you're going to be turning that into some of the negative shit that I've seen about Asian Americans in the Harvard administrator emails, you've lost it. You've lost this. You've lost the script. It's bullshit. It's not what I'm going to accept as a centrist in this country. I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to accept counter prejudice, right? I'm not going to accept that.
Well, this also brings up, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, so if you ask me, are you okay with this affirmative action ruling? My answer is yes. Now, obviously, that needs context. It's not just a yes. There's caveats to that.
Right.
But in that same breath, legacy admissions need to go away. Because let me tell you, I know people who have gotten into very prestigious schools only because their parents went there. And these people are, to say it politely, not the brightest bulbs in the chandelier. And they are not people that on their own merit would have ever gotten into a place like that. But they have because their parents win or their parents donate money or blah, blah, blah. Like those need to go. Everybody needs to be on an even keel. And I know it's not possible right now because the disparity is so large. But in a utopic world, everybody starts at the same place. And shocker, your achievement is what gets you to where you want to go. And so until we get there, it's going to be, and if we ever get there.
We're never going to get there, right?
No, exactly.
See,
but like,
there isn't any such thing as
no.
as a baseline for everybody. No. And in fact, you wouldn't really want that because it's been, as we discussed last week, it's been the disparity in resources, sometimes encountered by those who have success that have allowed them to make advancements in society with the excess capital or cash that they had. There's a saying, right? Or there's an attitude. And I don't like the attitude that some sort of social justice advocates have about the need for prejudice or discrimination now to redress discrimination in the past. I mean, even Ibram Kendi he's literally said what was it? I don't know if it was literally he said, but he essentially said the only cure for past discrimination is current discrimination. And I don't agree with that at all. I don't agree with that at all. The fact is you can work with groups of people to have them be more successful in these areas. I don't accept the attack on meritocracy in the United States. I don't accept the attack on knowledge in the United States. I don't accept the validity of other ways of knowing. Okay, I'm sorry. Well, there's what works and there's what doesn't work. Okay, well, the gurus and the results. Sorry, did I use the term guru? Jesus
no, that's
Christ.
right. No, you're fine. The discrimination thing. You're either anti-discrimination or you're pro-discrimination. Like, I mean, discrimination is one of those things, and it's like, so what is the difference between, like affirmative action and like, it is to some degree. If you're saying I'm hiring this person and the reason that I'm hiring this person is because they're a different race than another person, regardless of whether it's protected or not, that's still discrimination.
Right.
That is still discrimination. And what makes that different than any other form of discrimination? It's the same thing. Like you may have decided that it's an altruistic form of discrimination, but it is still discrimination. You're still saying that I'm going to give this particular race a leg up for whatever reason, and it may be a justified reason or whatever. It's still fucking discrimination, regardless of how you look at it. Right. And, and if it becomes a state by state thing, I mean, okay, like that will play out the way things like that play out. Like some states will, I live in Washington. Our governor came out the day this was announced and said, we are not changing anything about the way we do business. And I think a lot of states are going to probably follow suit there.
Yeah, but California actually struck down their affirmative action in the schools years ago.
Yeah, well, a lot of places.
You want to know the sad truth? Is it decreased participation in college for blacks and Hispanics. It did. And so you can expect the same thing to happen at Harvard. You can expect I would assert a 10 to 30% decrease in participation by blacks and maybe something similar for Hispanics. Do I like that? No. But I think that the solution for it is greater focus on solutions for education and educational access in the black community. That's where you look. And what's funny is, as a child, when I was first sort of addressing this, that's how I saw it. And I honestly haven't changed much since then. I always assumed that the move would be to give out appropriate, education to these communities. The problem is it gets turned into, and there's that thing where it starts to sound like the white man's burden, right? And I don't want to do that either. So I just kind of
like thinking about like what would I rather have? Would I rather someone say, you know what, we have this policy called affirmative action, which is going to give you a better chance of getting to a college or whatever, or would I rather see like every black child being given like an education voucher? I'm just ballparking right here, like an education voucher or something that you can use that is going to grant you access to these educational systems as you grow older, that are going to give you an equal footing with white kids, with any other child.
Like a voucher for a private school? Are we saying vouchers for private schools?
Saying, like you're going to be. I'm just saying you're going to be given, a parity in some form.
Are you good with school choice then? For black, I mean, look. So
as long as it is equitably handled, absolutely.
Okay, I mean,
I have no issue
I want to
with
be
choice.
clear. That's fairly controversial what you just said, and I'm okay because I would agree with you.
I don't think we should.
Space I have here is that I believe in school choice specifically because it would allow, and by the way, it's popular in the black community. It would allow schools to be created and focused directly to the needs of the black community. And I don't understand why people would be against that, but here we are.
No, I'm certainly not against it. I think as long as they are equitably handled and that everybody has equal access, I think absolutely. I think I have no problem. I don't think choice is a bad thing. I don't think any parent should be shoehorned into where they have to send their kid.
Right.
Because then you're taking away rights from the parent. Like then that is the epitome of like, you want the parents to have at least some level of control on where they send their kids to school, right? Like you want them to be able to
So I want to be clear that I am 100% in the realm of belief in school choice and even school vouchers. However, I don't believe in the abolishment of the public school system.
Oh, no, I don't either.
I think that the public school system should be subjected to the same type of thing you get subjected to in business, which is competition, right?
Well, that's the thing.
Competition will breed better quality for these schools. I mean, look, so it's funny, there's this big war going on in reading right now. So the way you teach reading, you have the science of reading, and then you have the older, whole language or 3Qing space. Okay. And I'm not going to go deep into those. It's really niche, but for me, it means something because my daughter, I could see some of the issues we had with this newer, for me, style of whole language or 3Qing. Part of the reason why she's in private school now is I want more science of reading, or really phonics-based reading taught to my child. And that's an example of where if there had been competition in the school system, that would have happened. That being said, there are going to be dozens of subjects that would work for black children in that space, that if you were to go into the black community and create schools tailored to the unique educational needs of black children, you would probably improve their test scores, their performance, their excitement about and around school. It would probably change the social acceptance of what school is in the black community, and really probably have there be less of an achievement gap. That's my assertion. Do I have the numbers to support that? No. And I know there's going to be 50,000 assholes out there saying, well, the data says, okay, fine. I don't believe that blacks are genetically inferior to whites. I don't believe it. And I think that you can have the same level of, or even greater, of performance for anybody, and it has nothing to do with their skin.
I think the argument's greater. I think the argument's greiter that they're generally superior to whites in a lot way.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say.
Like, there's no inferiority there. Like, if anything, they're blacks are way better than whites.
Well, I guess that's what I'm trying to say is that what makes that decision better, even that term, is going to be a subjective statement based on what you find of value in your life. Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, I like and always looked up to people that were performing in sports or in the arts, and blacks are unparalleled in these areas, as an example. Also, I want to be clear, I've worked with dozens of black individuals now at my work, and I've never got
y'all listen. Erik has one black friend.
No, it's not
I'm
one black
kidding,
friend.
I'm kidding.
It's
I'm kidding.
multiple
I'm
black
kidding.
friends.
I'm
No, I'm
kidding.
kidding. What I'm trying to say is I've never given a black individual leeway because they're black, because I think that's racist. In fact, I think the whole thing is it's ridiculous to me. You just treat people like people. And what I've found is some of the highest performing people I've ever worked with have been black. Duh.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, look,
It's crazy. The whole thing, the achievement gap itself is look, the reason why I bring the achievement gap up is because that's what affirmative action was about, is to close the achievement gap.
And it hasn't worked.
It has fucking failed for the last 30 years.
And look, I'm not saying that the idea behind it wasn't moderately noble at the time. Maybe it had. I'm sure there were good intentions behind it.
I think it was required at the time.
It just did not. It just did not go the way people thought it would go. And now we need to rethink that. Whether that is a state by state thing is up for discussion. Whether it is I'm not, I know this sounds like, I'm not always someone who thinks that everything should be on a state-by-state basis. I think some things are universal and need to be treated as such. But I think this is one of those, I'm thinking about it in terms of like, if a black person had gone to my high school, they'd have been fucked.
Yeah.
They'd have been fucked. Like, they would have gotten next to no education.
Yeah.
And like, I would want them to have a choice. You can either go to this like straight up cracker school and get a cracker ass education, or you can go to this school, that actually can do something for you. And you're not going to like, I don't think there's anything wrong with choice. Just yet another scoop of dirt into the grave of us being conservatives, Erik.
I know, yet more evidence, yet more grist for the mill. It's
we're going to do an episode soon, I promise, where we just rail on terrible things Republicans have done.
Well, no, I mean, here's what's funny is I know that this shows up for you as well as I do.
Yeah.
Everything that the Republicans did when we were children, not everything, but you know what I'm saying, that all of the big chunky ones were terrible, right? And that the stranglehold that religion had on the social conversation in the 70s and 80s was undeniable, and in fact was dying in the 80s. So you and I both, well, me more so than you, came of age in the 80s, and I was around as it died. And so I now just assume all of that stuff is stupid. Let them have their shit, right? Fine, and I always make this argument towards religious people. I'll say, look, if you don't want to have an abortion, I'm not saying you should be made to have an abortion. Don't have an abortion.
Yeah.
No, but I don't want other. So the concept that religious beliefs should be enforced on others by law is the ridiculous thing that I fought against as a kid, right, as a teen, and obviously is something that you consider now, especially as someone who's gay, right? Right, that it's a religious restriction. The stoning of gays. Generally murders the prescription for gayness. And I think that's more a human response, not a godly response, right? Most people want to kill gays because, dude, it's a trope now. How many Republican men have been anti-gay, and now it turns out that they're gay? It was self-hating weird shit.
Oh, that happens. Yeah, that happens.
And so the reason why you and I don't end up railing on conservatives is because some of the ridiculous realities are tropes by this point. The self-hating gay man showing up as a conservative Republican, legislating against gay people. It's ridiculous. When you hear of it, you go, yeah, anyways, let's move on. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That there's in many ways less social power to be a douchebag Republican than there is in being a douchebag progressive leftist trying to push weird shit on us, right? Like, but as an example, there's a woman in England who is talking about this. She's an author, and she's a member of the Igbo royal family who sold slaves until 1950. Okay, And for her to come up and start talking about whites having to atone for slavery is an example of ridiculousness from the left. You, ma'am, your family literally your nation sold millions of blacks into slavery.
Yeah.
Get out of here. 2 million people came out of Namibia.
You know whose family did not deal in slaves? Donald
who?
Trump's. You saw that this week, right? Donald Trump's the only president who has not got a connection to slave owners. And I'm
That's
like,
so
that's because his family was too fucking broke and trash ass to afford them.
Yeah, you're a trash. Exactly.
Like,
sorry.
Okay. Anywho,
all right.
Enough of the we've gone down plenty of tangents this week.
That was an important tangent. Okay, that was an important.
All
tangent.
of our tangents, all tangents are important. Eric.
The anti-Republican rant. I think that what we could do is we should do an episode where we just talk. Dude, your buddy Ramaswamy or whatever his name is, Ramaswamy. Holy shit!
He ain't my buddy. Let's be clear. He ain't my buddy.
That guy had probably one of the worst interviews I'd seen in a long time last week.
He's very problematic.
It's fucking terrible. And he was terrible. And the reality, it was exposed to me at that point that this is just a book writing campaign for him. That fucking asshole. But whatever. Yeah. So yeah, we could do a Republican shit talking one. It's just, you know what it is that I'm more liberal and I am more progressive. I'm not a progressive, but I'm more liberal and progressive than any fucking Republican or any conservative. And I just want my side to appear clean so that when I debate, my debate doesn't turn into whatabouts for so many stupid shit. Yeah. So much stupid, ridiculous shit being said from the left, when in reality, all of us want to reduce suffering. Will we ever completely just get rid of suffering? No. But is it appropriate to have the reduction of suffering as a lens? I assert it is. Okay? Is it ever going to be done? No. Because in fact, the line for what suffering moves. That's how you know you're being successful at reducing suffering in a society, is the line starts to move, and it's at that point when liberals and progressives need to start going, maybe it isn't. Maybe words aren't violence. Because that's a mistake. Maybe there's not enough violence, so the motherfucker is going to say words are violence. You're out of your mind. Anyways.
On that note, we want to thank you for listening yet again to our ramblings
and rantings.
Very quickly, and I mean very quickly before we go, this is a surprise for Eric. We got our first audience question.
Great. Let's go.
This is from Kara from Pittsburgh. So we got a Pittsburgh listener, Eric.
Beautiful.
Very simple question, but I'm not going to let you give a very long answer. We'll go in depth on a future episode. Who do you think is the most successful American president in history?
You go
Not
first.
the best, but most successful.
You have an answer. Let me think.
Mine is a very generic answer. I mean, look, you're going to ask me a lot of questions about presidents, and I'm just going to say FDR because I think that's the applicable answer, especially if we're talking about who accomplished the most. It's hard not to say FDR.
It's FDR because of the New Deal specifically, and because ironically enough, for this podcast, it was within his administration that the concept of affirmative action was first started to put into place.
Now, I think I think there's an argument to be made if the question is, say the question was which president has produced the most, let's say, fundamental change in society. Which president has changed the world the most? Let's put it that way. Then I think the argument is to be made that it's Truman. Because when you drop an atomic bomb, you're changing the world. So, there's a lot of different answers depending on the...
He has become death. But no, it's funny when you said it, because I started to think about that. I'm like, successful, got to be FDR, right? Because not only was the longest serving president, right?
Yeah.
But the New Deal was a radical departure. Now, to be fair, many would argue that FDR made that deal in the face of growing communist and anarchist pushes in society, and I would agree with that. But FDR, by the way, so funny. You and I didn't talk about this beforehand, but I agree. FDR, by the way, not even close. FDR, easily.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that question, Kara. Keep sending your questions in. We would love to chat about them.
That's awesome.
We'll answer a question.
Dude, I like that. I like I want people to send in more questions
I
because
know.
I had to think about that. My favorite president is an FDR, right?
No,
But
mine
it's
either.
not. Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Well, thank you all so much. The Center Clueless podcast is produced by Ryan Verrill. Hi, Ryan. Please visit us at centerclueless.com for more information or find us on the socials at Center Clueless. Please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. And folks, if you haven't reviewed us on Apple Podcasts yet, please do it. It only takes like 5 minutes. It's super helpful. So leave us a review, except if it's a nasty review, then you can keep it to yourself. If you have a question, comment, or criticism, you can email us at centerclueless@gmail.com. That's where you send us your nasty comments and your criticism.
Let's talk about your nasty. Your
Let's
nasty
talk
stuff is good. Yes.
Yeah,
please.
we will address your nastiness, and we'll do it in a very equitable way. And so email us there, and we would love to talk about it. Until next time, whether you're left, right, or somewhere in the center, we hope you're a little less clueless, just like us.